My name is Maya. I'm 28, and on the second Saturday of last October, I sat on the floor of my cramped Chicago apartment, eating a slice of cold deep dish pizza, watching my older sister walk down the aisle via a shaky Instagram livestream. I wasn't there because 3 weeks before her $80,000 Napa Valley wedding, Chloe called and uninvited me. She didn't scream or yell. She used that soft, curated voice she saves for her lifestyle aesthetic reels. She told me I was embarrassing. She said my social anxiety was a liability, that I lacked the elegance required for her bridal party, and that I didn't fit the stress-free vibe she needed for her big day. "I just need peace, Maya," she said, sighing into the receiver. "You always make things so complicated and awkward for everyone else." I didn't argue. Arguing with Chloe is like trying to convince a mirror to show a different reflection. You note the damage, you hang up, and you move out of the frame. But what my sister didn't know as she posed under the California sunset that evening, surrounded by our entire family, was that the luxury photographer she'd hired, the one she paid $8,000 for, was an old college friend of mine. And the raw, unedited SD card he handed me in a coffee shop 3 days after the wedding is the entire reason I'm telling you any of this. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet siblings who stopped trying to fit into the family picture and started keeping the negatives. If you've ever had a family member paint you as the problem so no one would look at the mess they were making behind the scenes, this one is going to feel incredibly familiar. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I work as a freelance video editor. My days are spent cutting out mistakes, fixing bad lighting, and making people look better on screen than they actually do in real life. Ironically, that's exactly the role I've played in my family for 28 years. Chloe is 30, stunning, and treats her life like a continuous PR campaign. My parents, a corporate lawyer and a real estate agent, treat her like a prime investment property. Me? I was the fixer. When Chloe maxed out her credit cards 2 years ago, I quietly Zelled her $5,000 so our dad wouldn't find out. When she forgot to budget for her premium floral arrangements, I paid the $2,500 deposit. No contracts, no fuss. In my family, I was the one who quietly handled things. But I didn't realize that my usefulness had an expiration date. The cracks started showing at her bridal shower in September. Chloe was obsessed with controlling every visual element of her wedding. I was supposed to be her maid of honor, but over the summer I noticed a shift. I was excluded from group chats. My dress fitting was mysteriously rescheduled without me. Then came the phone call that erased me from the family completely. The phone call wasn't dramatic. That's what haunts me about it. I was in the middle of editing a wedding video for a client. Ironic, I know, when Chloe's name lit up my screen. I remember pausing the footage on a frozen frame of a bride laughing, thinking about how strange it was that Chloe was calling instead of texting. She never called. Calling was inefficient, she always said. Texting left a curated trail. I picked up on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" There was a breath on the other end, a rehearsed pause. I know now that she'd practiced this, probably in front of her ring light, watching her own expressions to make sure she hit the right notes. "Maya, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to really hear me without getting defensive, okay?" My stomach dropped. In my family, without getting defensive is code for I'm about to say something terrible, and I've already decided you're not allowed to be hurt by it. I said, okay. What else could I say? "I've been doing a lot of reflecting," she began, using that breathy influencer cadence she'd perfected over the years. "And I've realized that having you in the wedding party is causing me a lot of stress. Your energy is just off. You make things awkward. You always have. And I can't have that kind of negativity on my most important day of my life." I sat very still. She kept going, filling the silence I couldn't find words for. Like, at the bridal shower, you barely talked to anyone. You just sat in the corner looking uncomfortable and made everyone else feel weird. Mom noticed. Everyone noticed. And I can't risk that at my wedding. The photographer, the videographer, they're capturing everything. I can't have you in the background looking like you don't want to be there. I wanted to tell her that I had sat there in the corner because she'd seated me there, that I'd barely talked to anyone because every time I tried to join a conversation, her friends looked through me like I was furniture, that I spent $300 on a dress she'd pre-approved, driven 4 hours to be there, and still somehow managed to be invisible and too visible at the same time. But I didn't say any of that, because underneath the shock, there was another feeling, a quieter one. The feeling of something I'd always suspected finally being confirmed. "So, what are you saying?" I asked, and my voice came out flatter than I expected. Clinical, like I was asking a client to clarify project specs. "I'm saying I think it's best if you don't come, to any of it. Not the rehearsal dinner, not the ceremony, not the reception. I need to protect my peace, Maya. I hope you can understand that." Protect her peace. There it was, the phrase people use when they want to be cruel but need it to sound like self-care. I asked about Mom and Dad, whether they knew. "They agree with me," she said, quickly, too quickly. "We all talked about it. Everyone thinks this is the best decision for the family." Everyone, the family. Words designed to make me feel like the problem had been officially voted on and I'd lost unanimously. I didn't cry on the phone. I didn't beg. I'd spent too many years watching family arguments in hospital waiting rooms and funeral homes to think that begging changed anything. Instead, I said, "Okay, I understand," and I hung up. I sat there in the blue glow of my editing monitor, my client's wedding frozen on screen, and I felt something crack down the middle of my chest. Not break, crack. The kind of crack that doesn't hurt immediately because the pieces are still touching. They just aren't connected anymore. That night, I called my mom. I don't know what I expected. Maybe some resistance. Maybe a "let me talk to her." Maybe just a sentence that acknowledged I existed as something other than a problem to be managed. What I got was worse. "Honey, I think Chloe's right." My mother's voice was careful, the way it gets when she's already rehearsed her position. "You do have a tendency to bring a certain heaviness to events. We're not saying you're a bad person. We're just saying maybe this isn't your moment to shine. Let your sister have her day." Let your sister have her day. As if my presence alone would somehow steal it. As if existing in the same room as Chloe was an act of aggression. I asked if Dad felt the same way. "Your father and I are on the same page," she said, which wasn't an answer, but was definitely a verdict. I thanked her. I actually thanked her. Years of conditioning had trained me to be polite even while I was being erased. After I hung up, I sat in the dark and did something I hadn't done in years. I scrolled through old family photos on my phone. Birthday parties where I stood slightly behind Chloe. Graduations where she was centered and I was cropped at the edge. Holidays where I was always the one taking the picture instead of being in it. I'd been disappearing from this family for years. I just hadn't noticed because I was so busy making everyone else look good. The weeks between that phone call and the wedding were the strangest of my life. I kept waiting for someone to reach out, an aunt, a cousin, anyone who might say, "This isn't right." But my phone stayed silent. Chloe had clearly managed the narrative before I could say a word. In group chats I was technically still part of, conversations about the wedding continued without acknowledging my absence. Seating arrangements, gift registries, excited emoji reactions, and my name nowhere in any of it. I considered crashing the wedding. I won't pretend I didn't. There's a specific fantasy that plays in your head when you've been publicly humiliated by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. But I knew how that would end. I'd be the crazy one, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't just let Chloe have her day. Every cruel thing they'd said about me would be retroactively justified. So I did something else instead. I started documenting. It sounds cold, I know, but I'm an editor. My entire job is preserving moments that matter and cutting out the ones that don't. I began saving everything. Screenshots of the group chats where my absence was never mentioned, the Venmo history showing the $7,500 I'd given Chloe over the past year with no repayment, text messages from my mother that started warm and became increasingly distant as the wedding approached. Every digital breadcrumb that told the real story, not the one my family was crafting. I didn't know what I'd do with any of it. I just knew that if I was going to be painted as the villain, I wanted the receipts to tell a different story. The wedding happened on a Saturday. I know because I watched it. Chloe had hired a social media coordinator, yes, that's a real thing now, to manage live content throughout the day. There was an Instagram account dedicated entirely to the wedding, and because Chloe craved validation more than privacy, it was public. I told myself I wouldn't look. I made it until 4 p.m. Then I was on my apartment floor with cold pizza, watching my entire family celebrate without me. My mom crying happy tears, my dad giving a speech about his perfect daughter, cousins I'd grown up with dancing, laughing, raising glasses, and Chloe, radiant in $15,000 worth of silk and lace, smiling like she'd achieved everything she ever wanted. Not once did anyone mention me, not in the speeches I could hear, not in the comments flooding the livestream. I had been so thoroughly erased that it was as if I'd never existed at all. And then I saw him, Marcus Webb, in the background of a wide-shot, professional camera in hand, capturing the father-daughter dance. Marcus, who'd been my photography partner on a documentary project junior year in college. Marcus, who'd crashed on my couch for 3 weeks after his apartment flooded. Marcus, who I hadn't talked to in almost 2 years, but who always called me the only real one in a world of fakes. He was my sister's $8,000 luxury photographer, and he had no idea he'd been hired to photograph the wedding I'd been erased from. I almost texted him right there, almost typed out, "This is insane, that's my sister." But something stopped me. Maybe the same instinct that had kept me quiet on the phone with Chloe, the instinct that told me to wait, to watch, to let people reveal themselves before I said anything. So I closed Instagram, I finished my pizza, and I waited. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Maya, it's Marcus Webb. We need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's something you need to see." I stared at that message for a long time. Marcus had always been direct. He wasn't the type to be vague for dramatic effect. If he was being vague now, it meant whatever he had was serious enough that he didn't want to put it in writing. I typed back, "Where and when?" He sent me the address of a coffee shop in Lincoln Park, the kind of place with exposed brick and overpriced oat milk lattes, the kind of place you have conversations you don't want overheard. I barely slept that night. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. It was a Tuesday, just after the morning rush. Marcus was already there, sitting in the back corner with a laptop bag and 2 drinks on the table. He looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He stood up when he saw me, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly, something closer to anger held carefully in check. "Maya," he hugged me briefly, the kind of hug you give someone before delivering bad news. "Sit down, I got you a coffee. Black, right? You still drink it black." I sat. I wrapped my hands around the cup because I needed something to hold on to. "How did you even know I wasn't there?" I asked. "At the wedding?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's the thing. I didn't, not at first. I was just the photographer, showed up, did my job, captured the aesthetic your sister wanted." Then he paused. "But then I started editing the footage, and I started noticing things." "What kind of things?" Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out a small case. Inside was an SD card. He set it on the table between us, like it was evidence in a trial. "Your sister," he said slowly, "is not who she's pretending to be, and not—" The next clip was from the morning of the wedding. Marcus had been hired to capture getting ready content, the kind of soft focus footage of champagne flutes and lace robes that performs well on Instagram. He'd set up a camera in the bridal suite while he stepped out to photograph the groomsmen, leaving it running to catch candid moments. What it caught, instead, was a conversation my sister never intended anyone to hear. Chloe was seated at a vanity mirror, a makeup artist working on her face, while 3 bridesmaids lounged on a white leather couch behind her. I recognized 2 of them, her college roommate Brittany and her work friend Jenna. The third was Derek's sister, a woman I'd never met. They were laughing about something when Brittany said, "I still can't believe Maya actually stayed away. I thought for sure she'd show up and cause a scene." Chloe rolled her eyes, careful not to disturb the makeup artist's work. "Please, Maya doesn't have the spine for that. She's too busy being a victim to actually do anything." "Didn't she pay for like half your flowers?" Jenna asked, scrolling through her phone. "She paid for the deposit," Chloe corrected, examining her reflection. "Which, honestly, was the least she could do. She's been riding on my coattails her whole life, always jealous, always making everything about her anxiety and her feelings." She made air quotes with her fingers. "I got so tired of managing her emotions. This is my day. I shouldn't have to babysit my mentally unstable sister." Mentally unstable. I felt Marcus watching me, but I couldn't look away from the screen. Derek's sister leaned forward. "So she really has no idea about the house thing?" The room got quieter. Chloe's expression flickered, loss of control for just a second, before she smoothed it back into practiced calm. "No," she said carefully, "and she's not going to. That's handled." "What house thing?" Brittany asked. Chloe waved her hand dismissively. "It's nothing, just some family estate stuff. Maya was supposed to get Grandma's house in the will, but we got it switched to me. She doesn't know yet. By the time she finds out, it'll be too late to contest." She said it like she was describing a minor scheduling change, like she was talking about switching a dinner reservation, not stealing an inheritance. "How did you even manage that?" Jenna asked, clearly impressed. "Mom handled it. Told Grandma that Maya was struggling financially and couldn't maintain the property, that she'd probably just sell it anyway. Grandma was already confused near the end. Early dementia, you know? It wasn't hard to convince her to change the paperwork." My grandmother who had died 8 months ago, who I'd visited every Sunday for the last 2 years of her life, who held my hand in hospice and told me, "The house is yours, sweet girl. It's always been meant for you." She'd left me that house in her original will. I knew because she'd shown me the document herself, her shaky finger pointing to my name. And Chloe had stolen it while she was dying. I reached forward and paused the video. My finger was trembling so badly that I missed the touchpad twice. "Maya," Marcus's voice was gentle, "there's one more clip. The worst one. Do you want to keep going or do you need a minute?" I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. "Keep going." He clicked to the next file. This one was from the reception. Late in the evening, judging by the lighting, that hazy golden hour footage that photographers love. The camera was positioned near the bar, capturing guests mingling. My parents were standing with Derek's parents and a few other older guests I didn't recognize. My father was holding a whiskey, his face flushed with alcohol and satisfaction. He was mid-story, gesturing broadly. And the best part is, Maya has no clue. She's sitting at home feeling sorry for herself, and she has no idea we've already frozen her out of everything. The house, the trust, the whole estate plan. He actually laughed. Derek's father looked uncomfortable. "That seems, I don't know, she's still your daughter." My mother stepped in smoothly, her PR voice activated. "We've given Maya every opportunity to be part of this family. She's chosen to be difficult at every turn. We're simply protecting our assets and our peace. Chloe is the responsible one. Chloe is the one who will carry on the family legacy properly." "Maya would just waste everything anyway," my father added, swirling his whiskey. The clip ended. I sat there in that coffee shop with my hands wrapped around a cup that had long gone cold, and I understood, finally, completely, what I was to my family. Not a daughter, not a sister, a liability, an inconvenience, a problem they had solved by erasing me from every document, every photo, every future they were planning. They hadn't just uninvited me from a wedding, they had uninvited me from the family itself. And they'd done it while smiling, while wearing expensive clothes, while toasting to love and happiness and forever. They had looked into cameras and performed warmth while plotting my complete elimination from their lives. Marcus closed the laptop slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just edit this stuff out and pretend I hadn't seen it. That's not who I am." "Why?" I asked. My voice came out hoarse. "Why show me this? You could have just delivered the highlight reel and collected your check." He was quiet for a moment. "Because 6 years ago, when I was sleeping on your couch and trying to figure out my life, you told me something I never forgot. You said, 'The truth always comes out, Marcus. The only question is whether you're the one who brings it into the light or the one who gets caught hiding from it.'" I didn't remember saying that, but it sounded like something I would have said, back when I still believed the truth mattered to people. "What do I do with this?" I asked, gesturing to the SD card. Marcus pushed the card toward me. "That's yours. I made a copy for my own records, call it professional insurance, but the original is yours. What you do with it is your choice. Chloe paid you $8,000 for those photos." "She paid me for edited photos that make her look good," Marcus corrected. "This isn't that. This is documentation, and documentation belongs to the person who needs it most." I picked up the SD card. It was so tiny, such a tiny thing to contain so much destruction. "I need to think," I said. "Take all the time you need." Marcus pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "But Maya, don't wait too long. People like your sister, they're always 3 steps ahead. If she finds out you know about the house before you've made your move, she'll find a way to spin it. She'll make you the villain again." He was right. I knew he was right, but I also knew that whatever I did next, there was no going back from that. I thanked him. I took the SD card, I walked out of that coffee shop and into the sharp October air, and I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, just breathing. For 28 years, I had been the fixer, the quiet one, the one who smoothed things over and wrote checks and showed up and asked for nothing in return. I had built my entire identity around being easy, being helpful, being the person who never made waves. And they had used every bit of that against me. They had counted on my silence, on my compliance, on the fact that I would never, ever fight back, because fighting back wasn't who I was. But standing there on that sidewalk, something shifted. I thought about my grandmother, about her hand in mine, papery and thin, her voice barely above a whisper as she told me about the house. "Your grandfather built the back porch himself," she'd said. "I want you to sit on that porch someday, Maya. I want you to know that you have a place that's yours." They had taken that from me while she was dying, while I was holding her hand, and they had done it because they thought I would never find out. That night, I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. Instead, I did what I do best. I edited. I sat down at my workstation, plugged in Marcus's SD card, and I began going through every frame of footage. Not for revenge, not exactly, for clarity, for evidence, for the kind of documentation that couldn't be dismissed as Maya being dramatic or Maya misunderstanding. I pulled the audio from the rehearsal dinner. I cleaned it up, removed the background noise, made my mother's words crystal clear. Some family members are a lost cause. I isolated the bridal suite conversation, enhanced the sound so every syllable was crisp. Maya was supposed to get Grandma's house in the will, but we got it switched to me. I cut together the reception footage, my father's proud confession, my mother's smooth justification. We're simply protecting our assets and our peace. And then I did something I hadn't planned on doing. I started researching. Estate law in Illinois, elder exploitation statutes, undue influence on incapacitated persons, the legal definition of fraud. I found out that changing a will while someone has documented cognitive decline is, under certain circumstances, a crime.
I found out that undue influence cases are winnable when there's evidence that the incapacitated person was isolated from certain family members before the change. I found out that I had 6 months from my grandmother's death to contest the will, and only 4 months had passed. I also found something else. 3 weeks before my grandmother died, there had been a family meeting at her house. My mother, my father, Chloe, and Grandma's estate attorney. I knew this because my grandmother...
Patricia moved fast. Within a week, she had subpoenaed my grandmother's medical records from Mercy Hospital and her primary care physician. She obtained copies of both wills, the original from 2019 and the amended version from just 7 weeks before Grandma died. The difference between them was surgical. In the original will, my grandmother had left the house on Maple Avenue to me. Just me. A 3-bedroom brick bungalow in Oak Park that my grandfather had bought in 1968, that he'd renovated with his own hands, that my grandmother had lived in for 54 years. It was worth roughly $485,000 in the current market, and it was the only real asset my grandmother had. In the amended will, dated 11 weeks before her death, the house went to Chloe. Everything else, the language, the smaller bequests, the charitable donations, remained identical. Only my name had been removed and replaced with my sister's, as if someone had simply opened the document, hit find and replace, and swapped one granddaughter for another. Patricia pointed something out that made my blood go cold. "Look at the date of the amendment," she said, laying the medical records beside the will. "September 14th. I looked at the medical records from that same week. On September 11th, 3 days before the will was changed, my grandmother's physician had documented significant cognitive decline and increasing confusion regarding financial and legal matters. He had recommended a formal capacity evaluation. That evaluation never happened. Instead, 3 days later, my grandmother had signed an amended will in a meeting I was never told about, surrounded by family members who had spent months telling her that I was struggling and couldn't be trusted with property. "This is textbook undue influence," Patricia said, underlining the dates in red. "They waited until she was cognitively compromised. They isolated you from the primary beneficiary, and they presented the change as being in your best interest. This isn't just shady. Under Illinois law, this is potentially criminal." "About the video?" I asked. "The video is the thing that turns this from a difficult case into an undeniable one. In most estate disputes, the family argues about what the deceased really wanted. It becomes he said, she said. But your sister admitted on camera, clearly, specifically in her own words, that they convinced your grandmother to change the will while she was confused. That's not interpretation, that's confession." Patricia filed a formal will contest with the Cook County Probate Court on a Tuesday morning. 48 hours later, my phone exploded. My mother called 7 times. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that started sweet and descended into fury over the course of an afternoon. The first one, "Maya, sweetheart, there seems to be some kind of misunderstanding with Grandma's estate. Can you call me so we can sort this out as a family?" The last one, 4 hours later, "I cannot believe you would do this to your own family. After everything we've done for you, you are tearing this family apart over a house." I saved every voicemail. I forwarded every one to Patricia. Chloe's approach was different. She went to social media. She posted a long, carefully worded Instagram story, black text on a cream background, the font she used for her vulnerable content. It read, "Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. Dealing with a family situation that has broken my heart. I've always tried to be there for my sister, but some people are determined to destroy what they can't control. Sending love to everyone going through something similar. You are not alone. Broken heart." 312 people liked it. The comments were full of hearts and "Stay strong, queen," and "Toxic family members are the worst." She'd done it again, gotten ahead of the story, cast herself as the victim before I could say a word. I screenshotted it, sent it to Patricia, and closed the app.
"Let her post," Patricia said when I called, rattled despite myself. "Social media sympathy has a shelf life of about 72 hours. Court documents last forever." My father tried a different tactic entirely. He showed up at my apartment. I was editing a client video, a corporate training series, the kind of soul-numbing work that pays the bills, when there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole and saw my father standing in the hallway, shoulders hunched, holding a paper bag from my favorite bakery. I almost didn't open the door. Almost. But some part of me, the part that still remembered him teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway, the part that still flinched every time I acknowledged what he'd become, turned the lock. He looked old, older than 61 should look. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands shook slightly as he held out the bag. "Chocolate croissant. Your favorite. Can I come in?" I let him in. I didn't take the croissant. He sat on my couch, the same couch Marcus had slept on 6 years ago, and he looked around my apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. The editing bay in the corner, the framed photo of me and Grandma on the bookshelf, the small kitchen where I'd eaten cold pizza while watching my sister's wedding. "Maya," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "This has all gotten out of hand. I know you're upset. I know we haven't been fair to you, but you have to understand. Your mother and I were trying to protect the family. The house, the estate, it's complicated. We made decisions we thought were right." "You laughed," I said. He blinked. "What?" "At the reception, you were standing at the bar with Derek's parents, and you were laughing about how I had no idea you'd frozen me out of the estate. You called my career a hobby. You said you weren't going to reward failure." The color drained from his face. "How? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you did it, and you thought I'd never know." He sat there for a long time, his hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. And for one moment, one breath, I saw the man who'd carried me on his shoulders at the 4th of July, the man who'd sat with me through thunderstorms and told me I was brave. Then he looked up and said the thing that killed it forever. "If you drop the case, we can work something out. Your mother is willing to give you a portion of the estate, not the house, but a fair settlement. We can put this behind us and move forward as a family." A portion. Not the house, not what Grandma wanted. A portion determined by the people who had stolen everything from me. And move forward as a family, as if we were one, as if we ever had been one. "Dad," I said, and my voice was so steady it surprised even me. "I'm not dropping the case, and I need you to leave." His face crumbled, not with guilt, with frustration, the face of a man who'd come to negotiate and realized the other party wasn't negotiating. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly as he stood up. "You're going to tear everything apart, and when it's over, you'll have nothing. No family, no one." "I already have nothing. You made sure of that. The only difference is that now I have proof." He left the croissant on the counter. I threw it away after the door closed. The court date arrived on a cold Thursday in December. The hearing was in a wood-paneled room at the Daily Center. Patricia sat beside me in a navy suit, her leather-bound notebook open, her face unreadable. Across the table sat my family's attorney, a silver-haired man named Richard Calloway who billed $600 an hour and smelled like expensive cologne and overconfidence. And behind them, my mother, my father, and Chloe. Chloe was dressed in soft cream, almost bridal, her makeup minimal, her expression arranged into wounded grace. She looked like a woman who'd been deeply wronged. She'd probably practiced it in the mirror. My mother sat rigid, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on a point above my head. She wouldn't look at me. My father looked at the table. Calloway opened with a confident narrative. Maya Young was a troubled, envious young woman who couldn't accept my grandmother's legitimate decision to amend her estate plan. The family had supported Maya for years. They had tried to include her, but she had self-isolated due to mental health challenges. The will amendment was Grandma's own wish, signed freely, witnessed properly. It was a good story, smooth, professional, the kind of story that wins when the other side has nothing but feelings. Patricia let him finish. She didn't interrupt once. Then she stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to present the following evidence." She laid it out like you lay out a hand of cards when you know you've already won. First, my grandmother's medical records, showing documented cognitive decline 3 days before the will was amended, the physician's note recommending a capacity evaluation that never came to pass. Second, my own records, 2 years of weekly visits, logged and dated, receipts from prescriptions I'd picked up, groceries I'd bought, the homemade I personally arranged and paid for. Third, the Venmo records showing $7,500 in transfers from me to Chloe. Every dollar, every date, 0 repayment. Fourth, the original will, with my name on it, in my grandmother's hand. And then Patricia pulled out her laptop. "Your Honor, I'd like to play 3 video recordings captured during the respondent's wedding celebration. These recordings were made by the event's hired photographer in the course of his professional duties. They contain statements made by the respondent and her parents that are directly relevant to this matter." Calloway objected. Patricia had anticipated it.